So this costume is called the Angel of Death, fabulously, and it was designed jointly by Freddie Buretti, who was a close collaborator of Bowie in the early 70s, and Bowie himself.
I'm Jessica, the museum guide, and today I'm somewhere very remarkable. I'm at the sneak preview of the David Bowie Centre at the Victoria and Albert Storehouse East. It isn't due to open until this Saturday, which is a few days from now, but I've been invited to a special preview, so I'm thrilled to be able to share that with you. The David Bowie Archive includes 414 costumes as well as 90,000 items, including musical instruments, personal correspondence, possessions, and all kinds of other ephemera. Hopefully you can book a trip to London to see this in person yourself sometime soon, but just in case you can't, don't worry, I'm here to share the whole thing with you from the comfort of your own home. So we're first going to look around a little bit. I've got a David Bowie expert and friend here to tell you a little bit about some of the objects, and then I'm going to tell you a bit more about the history of the archive and Bowie himself. But let's start looking.
On September 13th, this Saturday, we will be opening the David Bowie Centre, the new home of David Bowie's archive here at V&A East Storehouse.
Let's start with this 1997 Union Jack frock coat, designed by another member of British fashion royalty, Alexander McQueen. Bowie wore this on the cover of 1997's Earthling album. By the way, here's a picture of another Alexander McQueen frock coat that Bowie wore for his 50th birthday that year. Okay, this might be the object that I'm most excited about. You can see I've even lowered my voice in hushed tones of awe. It's the crystal ball that he used in Labyrinth. Of course, every 70s, 80s, 90s baby knows this prop and David Bowie playing Jareth in the movie. Did you hear that they're making a sequel? I don't know how to feel about that. Anyway, it won't be the same without Bowie and this crystal ball and his codpiece.
Hi, my name is Shane James Bordas. I am a YouTuber. I've got a channel called Take 55 where I talk about old cinema, and I'm also a David Bowie expert that works at the V&A East Storehouse. So what we're looking at here is in 1999, I originally moved from Canada to London, and I got to meet David Bowie, which was a big deal for me at the time. So there's one thing I might have to contextualize. At the time, Bowie was still revered as a cultural icon, but nobody was actually particularly interested in the music he was making at the time, if I'm going to be quite honest about it. And he was pushing his latest album, which was called Hours, but also a video game, which at the time was called The Nomad Soul, but it became renamed as Omicron, and we have a version of it here, right behind me. And this was a CD-ROM that Bowie wrote songs for and also featured in. And there's a couple of photographs that are also from the Hours period as well. So this was used on the artwork and single artwork. But this is quite interesting, this piece above. So this is a Korg Trinity keyboard, and this was the keyboard that he actually used to write the demos for most of his last albums on. So the stories that I heard, whether apocryphal or not, is that his wife Iman didn't want him to have a studio in their house because she thought that he would be kind of hidden away writing music. So he only had very, very modest gear to write on, and the Korg Trinity is what he used to write a lot of the songs that ended up on albums like The Next Day and Black Star. So another piece that's of great interest, so this dates back from the 1960s. So this is the stylophone that David Bowie used for his song Space Oddity. Now, there is, again, a kind of urban myth that maybe Mark Bolan from T-Rex gave it to Bowie. I don't think it's necessarily true, unfortunately. It was probably more likely that Bowie at that time was looking for sponsorship. He was looking to get into the press, to get his name out there. So Stylophone would have sent it to his manager, and he ended up using it on the record looking for a sponsorship deal. I do believe that he actually did an advert for Stylophone around that time, and it is featured on the record. But this became a kind of running thread throughout his career. There's another Stylophone that the Storehouse has on level 1 that he used in the 1970s, which was actually new to me. It's a different, much, much larger version of the instrument. But it was seen as a kid's toy, but it ended up becoming woven into his myth. So very, very interesting piece. And the last thing I'll say about this is that apparently when he started to collect and archive his own materials in the 90s, he had to buy this off eBay, apparently. So that's a great story. Yeah?
If you're new to my channel, welcome. I create meticulously researched museum tours of galleries, museums, and oddities around London and the world, and I'm delighted that you're here. I hope you choose to click subscribe and join me. If you are a regular viewer and you want even more content, head on over to my Patreon. I release an extra video tour every single month. In October, it will be a video about the goriest paintings in the National Gallery. Some more studio photographs. Wow, that's really cool. I always love it when you can see an artist's palette like you've caught them at work. Ah, here next to it is a sketch of his character, Button Eyes, a character that he plays in his last two videos, Black Star and Lazarus. A really haunting image, and actually, in interesting timing, that video is playing on the screen behind me right now. Here's a reference letter that was sent by his dad so that he could try to get a job, probably in 1966. It was written to the head of a Mayfair legal firm, and it says, whenever he takes on an idea of any kind, he never lets up and he puts everything he has into it. Ah. Bowie did go on to work as a paralegal at the London firm Legastat in 1968. Next to it, we can see this letter from Lady Gaga, gushing about how she was so honored to have received a copy of his new album, and she couldn't believe that he, or his PR team, had heard of her and begging for a meeting. Of course, Lady Gaga did go on to perform the tribute to Bowie at the 2016 Grammy Awards after his passing. Back down next to the letter from his dad, we can see a rejection letter from the Beatles' Apple Records. The rejection letter states that he was just not what they were looking for right now. Clearly, Bowie wasn't too put off by this rejection because he went on to have one of the most impressive and famous music careers of all time. This is cool. This is the EMS suitcase synth that was given to David Bowie by Brian Eno. Eno worked with Bowie as a musician, composer, and collaborator, and this synthesizer was used on the Berlin trilogy of albums, Low, Heroes, and Lodgers. Eno wasn't the official producer, but he was hanging around and working on them. What an impeccable piece of tailoring. This ice blue suit comes from the Aladdin Sane period, around 1973, and Bowie wore it in the Life on Mars video. And most of the objects in this display case are actually from that iconic time in his career. Of course, I even used that image for the thumbnail for this video. Like so many of the other suits that Bowie wore during this time period, the mint green suit was designed by Hackney-born, that's a local boy, Freddie Buretti. There are lots of other Buretti costumes on hangers in kind of laundry bags almost, with clear plastic panels so that you can see inside of them. I'll just pan up to that now. This knit jumpsuit was designed by Japanese designer Kansai Yamamoto. He was such a pivotal part of Bowie's look, designing all of the costumes for the 1973 Aladdin Sane tour. In 2013, to coincide with the Victoria and Albert Museum's David Bowie exhibition, they staged 5 Kansai Yamamoto fashion shows called Fashion in Motion. Yamamoto passed away at the age of 76 in 2020. Let's talk a little bit about the background now. So the Victoria and Albert recently acquired the David Bowie Archive in 2023. This is a continuation from their best performing exhibit in the museum's history that took place in 2013. That was called David Bowie Is. The acquisition was in part due to the Victoria and Albert Museum, but also thanks to £10 million of donations from the Blavatnik family and Warner Brothers Music to ensure that the Bowie collection has a public home in perpetuity.
One of the real interesting things for us when we acquired the archive is we realised how involved David Bowie was in developing the archive, working with his team. Since the 1990s, he took an active part in securing that material, working with his team to identify items that he thought was worthy of preservation, but also where they come from and what projects he worked on, which has really helped us to piece together some of that history and understand some of those unrealised projects which are included in the display today.
The objects on display, including 414 costumes, will rotate and change regularly. That's because this is an unusual style of curation called open curation. Now, you may remember a few months ago when the Victoria and Albert Storehouse East first opened, I came and did an off-the-cuff tour on it. Now, I kind of over-egged its unique nature. I said it was the first of its kind. It's not. There are a lot of other museums around the world experimenting with this open style of curation, but I still argue that the Victoria and Albert is doing it in exciting and new ways, including with this David Bowie Centre. Like the rest of the V&A Storehouse, not everything from the Bowie Archive will be on display at once. V&A archivists and star curators will make selections to go on display in a series of rotating showcases. The curators right now are the legendary chic band leader Nile Rodgers, a close friend of Bowie's. The two collaborated on 1983's Let's Dance, amongst many other projects. The collection actually includes personal correspondence between Bowie and Rodgers about the 1993 Black Tie White Noise album. You can see that here. Rodgers says, "My creative life with David Bowie provided the greatest success of his incredible career, but our friendship was just as rewarding. Our bond was built on a love of the music that had both made and saved our lives." The other inaugural curator is the band The Last Dinner Party, the Brit Award-winning indie rock band. Some of the items they've chosen include the handwritten lyrics for the Young Americans album, studio photos by Mick Rock, you can see those here, and the manual for Bowie's EMS Synth, heard on the Berlin trilogy of albums. The museum also worked with local young people from the neighbouring boroughs of Tower Hamlets, Newham and Waltham Forest in order to explore the impact that David Bowie continues to have on culture today. Some of the kids had never actually heard of David Bowie before they were involved in the collaboration. While the space is actually rather small, after all, it's a museum within a museum, the curators have managed to fit a pretty good cross-section of stuff that reflects Bowie's entire career. For me, the only downfall is that this is here in Hackney Wick instead of in Brixton or even Bromley, where Bowie grew up. And by the way, tickets are free, but you do need to book a ticket because the space is small and limited. Here we can see an American military jumpsuit that Bowie wore for the Young Americans tour and promotions. The jumpsuit dates to 1975, and that's roughly around the time that he wore it. It would have been brand new at the time. You can also see a photo there of Bowie in the studio singing with his studio musicians for that song, Young Americans. Here's one of my favorite objects in the entire collection. If you look here, you can see this framed photograph of Little Richard. And looking even closer, you can see it's actually been repaired with some tape. When David Bowie was a little boy, his real name was David Jones, his father would bring home American LPs, record albums, and he really fell in love with American rock and roll and soul. He said that when he first heard Little Richard sing Tutti Frutti, he, quote, heard God, and this photo remained one of his prized possessions throughout his childhood and his entire life. And they have some photos here from the 1975 Grammy Awards. That's when Bowie wore this incredibly dapper tux designed by American designer Jan Girard. And here's a very famous photo of Bowie with John Lennon, Yoko Ono, Simon and Garfunkel, and Roberta Flack. That night, Bowie presented Best Female R&B Performance to a very nonplussed Aretha Franklin. He gave what he later described as a very long-winded, incomprehensible, cocaine-fueled speech. He chalked it up to nerves being his first time presenting at the Grammys. Looking back on that night, record producer Clive Davis remembered Bowie as a, quote, vision in an incredibly elegant tuxedo with a white tie and his eye-catching shades of orange and yellow hair. This is such a remarkable piece. These giant metal angel wings were from the 1987 Glass Spider tour. These were used for the encore when Bowie performed Time from the Aladdin Sane album atop the 60-foot Spider set. By the way, the gold-winged boots that he wore during that performance are also in the collection, and we'll see them a bit later on. Some stills from the Let's Dance music video, which highlighted the realities of life for Indigenous Australian people. The video, which was filmed in the Australian outback, starred dancers from Sydney's Aboriginal and Islander dance troupe. And here's a letter from some students for the Aboriginal Music Studies program at Adelaide University thanking Bowie for this representation. This display case features a number of notes and drawings associated with Bowie's unrealized and unfinished projects. Here's some sketches for a project he never made, a movie about diamond dogs. That would have been cool. These post-it notes are notes for an unrealized musical based on 18th century newspapers called The Spectator. He was working on this at the time of his death in 2016. It was based on a daily newspaper of the same name from the mid-18th century and highlighted the good and evil, rich and poor in society. That would have been a really cool project to see.
3 days that you see here are our thematic section, which will rotate roughly every 6 months. Our first theme that we're looking at is in dialogue with the history of Black British music, due to our exhibition that is opening at V&A East Museum in spring 26, entitled The Music is Black, A British Story, looking at 125 years of Black British music. And then we also look at Bowie's longtime collaborator and musician, Gayle and Dorsey, one of the longest serving members of his band.
Here are some of those costumes that the curator was talking about, worn by Gayle and Dorsey. She was the longest running band member in Bowie's band, playing with him for 18 years. Bowie said of her, "I never had a bass player who understood my music as well as she did." Wow, I love this cream suit. I remember seeing this suit on Much Music when I was a kid. This is from the Serious Moonlight Let's Dance video, and the suit was designed by Peter Hall. Looking up into these archival boxes, you can see how some of the photographs and other documents are being stored. Looking up above us, we can see just some of those 400 plus costumes. A shirt by Kenny Hope for the Earthling tour. Here's one of my favorites here, the suit designed by Terry Mugler for Bowie's wedding to Iman in 1992. Mugler did a lot of designing for Bowie at the time. He also designed a suit in this bag for when Bowie was fronting Tin Machine for the It's My Life tour. And then the big designer names don't stop coming. Here's Giorgio Armani and a suit jacket for the Sound and Vision tour in 1990. We're just going to go into the Bowie study room now, where they're doing some object handling demonstrations.
If you want to see objects like costumes, instruments, props, that's through our Order and Object service.
This costume is called the Angel of Death, designed jointly by Freddie Buretti, who was a close collaborator of Bowie in the early 70s, and Bowie himself. And then this silk ensemble is by Japanese designer Kansai Yamamoto, and that was worn with either these hot pants or a pair of kind of silk culottes. And then we also have these silk booties as well. But these costumes were worn quite interchangeably with other items from the kind of Ziggy wardrobe. So we have these platform shoes, which were also worn with this outfit at various points. So these are hand-painted wooden platforms. They're from a shop in New York called Pelican Footwear. And we have a number of different pairs of these kind of painted platforms in the collection. So we have those green and pink pair over there on display, and a couple of others as well.
Did he have really tiny feet?
Very tiny feet.
My God, it looks like I could fit in those.
Yeah, they're tiny, these. I mean, all of the costumes are very, very tiny.
He was so small.
Very small,
yeah.
But yeah, I mean, they're such visual shorthand for Bowie and his artistry.
Wow.
It's just a costume from 1979 here, which my colleague did.
Oh.
So Bowie wore this for his 1979 performance on Saturday Night Live.
Wow.
He performed 3 songs and had 3 outfit changes. He wore this when he performed The Man Who Sold the World. And this is a costume that he designed jointly with Mark Rabbit. And that was based really closely off the costumes in a 1920s Dadaist play. The costumes designed for that were by the painter Sonia Delaunay.
Okay.
They were made out of cardboard, painted. So this costume sort of maintains that rigidity, but it's obviously made of more modern for the times materials, softer materials. It's still very restrictive for him in terms of movement, his performance, and I think that was part of the design concept. So Bowie had to step into the costume, and his backing singers lifted him up from under the shoulders and brought him up to the microphone.
So this is a 12-string harp-tone acoustic guitar that was used by Bowie during the Ziggy Stardust period in the early 70s, but specifically this guitar was played in the Space Oddity music video.
And we have a very similar harp tone acoustic just in the case over there, so it obviously was a preferred model for him at that time. And this exact one has never been exhibited before.
Wow.
So that's really exciting. And it's really lovely. We've got the case with all the sort of luggage stickers as well. You can see he just checked it into the hold. So it was clearly, you know, very well loved and well played on tour as well.
Amazing. What's the key?
So the key is the key to Bowie and Iggy Pop's shared apartment in Berlin.
No, it's not.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
So again, it's really lovely that he kept personal items like that in the archive as well. And it's got this characteristic double-ended key design, which apparently is characteristic of Berlin apartments, but who knew?
Wow, if
Yeah.
those walls could talk.
Exactly. This is a koto, which is the national instrument of Japan. And this was used on the song Moss Garden on the album Heroes. So it sort of speaks to Bowie's real fascination, lifelong fascination with Japanese culture. And then here we have 2 examples of fan art that was sent to Bowie.
Wow.
So this is some of my personal favourites. We have a really large collection of fan art. It seems like Bowie kept a huge amount of what he was sent, and it was kept in the same sort of museum grade level of care and cataloguing as all the other objects, which is really lovely. So at the back we have a music box that was sent to Bowie by a fan in 1980 after they'd seen him perform in the play The Elephant Man. And there's a really lovely letter that accompanies that where the fan says they wanted to send a sort of reciprocal gesture of their own creativity because they enjoyed his creativity so much.
Wow.
Which is really lovely.
We've gone a little bit backwards here. We started right in the center of the exhibit, but I'm now in the entry hallway leading down into the exhibit. I'll show you a few of the pieces that are here. We can see Bowie's Aladdin Sane jacket here. It's made out of lame, satin, and cotton. Was designed by Freddie Buretti in 1973 for that Aladdin Sane period. This is his guitar that he played during the Ziggy Stardust period. Some of these shoes, like the pink and green, also made by Pelican Footwear, but these winged cowboy boots, these were made by Goyle's Leather Shop. And these very cool boots, these were made in Iceland in 1997 for the Earthling Tour, while these ones here were made by Flamenco of Spain in 1970. They kind of look like bowling shoes to me. And in this cabinet here, we can see just some of the pop cultural objects and items that show us just how far-reaching Bowie's legacy is today. Statues, figurines, glass etchings, and even some official licensed Barbie dolls wearing that ice blue suit that we've already seen as well, the Freddie Buretti suit. And here, this section of the wall here called the Library of Connections.
Across from you we have what we call the Library of Connections, which is an interactive display which traces Bowie's biography, major albums, but makes connections between popular culture and shows the true footprint and impact that he's had, how he's so interwoven into popular culture today, and his influence upon artists such as Charlie XCX, Kendrick Lamar, Chappell Roan.
Some of the people at work hard on the collection. As the curator was mentioning, just showing you some of the different artists and musicians today, including Chappell Roan, Janelle Monáe, Lady Gaga, who've been inspired by David Bowie. Let's just pop over now to look at the David Bowie display case that is out in the greater part of the museum. I was just speaking to a museum employee and they were saying, you know, they know a lot of people are going to turn up to see the David Bowie Centre without realizing that they needed special tickets. So it's nice to have a little case here so at least they can get a taste. Remember, if you want to come to see this exhibit, you need to book in advance. It is free, but you've got to book. You can see, wow, makeup mapping, makeup for touring, a makeup chart for touring in 1976, a set list, some amazing boots, a face cast. You know I've got videos about death masks and life casts, so very cool. All right, that was a whistle-stop tour through the new David Bowie Centre, and I really hope that you get to come and see it yourself in person. I'll see you the next time I'm at the museum.